Hey guys, the fact that I'm recording in China actually does still influence what I do and how I do it. In this video, what I'd really like is actually to go back to put in a clip from an older video I have that's called Real Politics, Fake Diet. There's a nice moment in that video, all unscripted and unrehearsed, where I just replied to another vegan who was talking about how veganism was about looking like freely. And where I just said spontaneously, I don't think veganism is about how you look or who you look like. I don't think veganism is about looking like freely, and I don't think veganism is about looking like Patrick Stewart, or anyone else. It's just a moment that came up spontaneously. Now, because I'm in China and because uploading is really difficult, I'm not going to add that in. If I get into the editor and adding clips, it increases the file size, and I don't know if I can get this onto YouTube at all when the files get too large. But in this video, what I'm responding to is a whole genre of videos here on YouTube, but also one particular example from a very successful young YouTuber named Claire Michelle. Now, some of you guys get and some of you guys don't get the tone with which I comment on this phenomenon of younger, primarily female vegans creating a public image for themselves on the internet, and then they basically start to profit from the image politics. Now, I know what it's like to get money when you're still in your teens. When I think I was 16, but maybe I was still 15 when I first started publishing articles, in small magazines. But back then, whether I made $200 or $400 as a journalist, at a very, very low level. But when you're still living with your parents, you're not paying your own rent, a little bit of money like that, a few $100s, can have a big impact on your life, and it may have a big impact on how you perceive yourself. In my case, it didn't. Well, it wasn't an ego trip for me. Publishing a few articles didn't mess me up too much. But sure, a few $100s can go a long way. So it's very easy for me to imagine how a few $100s from YouTube, talking about your life, talking about beauty, or putting on a bikini and filming yourself at the beach, I definitely understand that can powerfully shape how you perceive yourself, how you're living your life, and so on. What I'm really responding to in this video right now, recorded at 5:30 a.m. in China. I've been getting up early. My video yesterday was recorded at 4:30 a.m., I think. I really can relate to exactly 50% of the discourse that I get from people like Claire Michelle. And then there's a flip side. There's another 50% that leaves me cold and that I feel I have to respond to negatively. I mean negatively in an almost logical sense here, pointing at the opposite, pointing at the other side. I see these young women primarily coming on the internet. I know just one young man who's in this category. There are probably a couple young men doing the same thing. But I see these young women coming onto the internet, and they kind of present a philosophy that life is not about being as skinny as possible, that life is not about being as beautiful as possible. And I realize they're saying that because they themselves are under pressure, quite literally, to appear in a bikini on Facebook, on Instagram, on their YouTube channel. That's actually how they're earning their money. And in many of these cases, these young women have either dropped out of university or dropped out of high school, or have just decided not to enroll in university at all, to take this on as a kind of short-term career path, as being a self-made model, self-made internet personality, what have you. So there is real pressure on them, to be blunt, to exploit their own sexuality, to exploit their own image. And, they're doing it. That's very directly what their internet presence is based on and what have you. But again, I really do sympathize. I really do understand that they have a kind of philosophical reaction to that, of saying, look, this is not who I really am. This is not what life is really about. So Claire Michelle, in the video I just watched, she says, when you're 80 years old and you look back on your life, when you look back on your life from a distance at an old age, do you think you're really going to remember that you maintained a size 0 figure? Do you think you're really going to remember how you looked in a bikini, or that you maintained certain physical features like a thigh gap that some women strive for, that you worked so hard to get certain results? And she says no. That she is in effect saying, this is not the meaning of life. This is not what you're going to look back on and value, and what's going to stay with you. So that first 50% of the argument, I really do sympathize with. I sympathize with why they're saying it. I sympathize with what they're saying, and I sympathize with the whole direction they're moving in. But then the next 50% is that she goes on to argue, as I've seen others argue, others in this kind of genre or in this category, of vegans. We're just talking about vegans here. But still, it's a huge kind of genre right now. In terms of the number of viewers, it's huge. And in terms of the cultural influence, probably a lot of young women are being influenced by this. In a sense, a lot of young men are being influenced by this too. Probably having a very different effect on the male audience. But the next 50% of what she does is then to go on to argue for what she thinks is meaningful and important by contrast. And like many other young women in this genre, what she's really arguing for is the importance of what I call the permanent vacation, even though I think in her case, I think it's just a temporary vacation. If you watch earlier videos on my channel here, I'm not against vacations. If you want to go on vacation for 2 weeks, fine. But I do not think young people should drop out of college to go on vacation forever. Or I don't think they should give up their ambitions or career paths, or stop trying to make the world a better place so they can go on vacation. And I do not think you should convince yourself that your vacation itself is a form of activism, that the vacation makes the world a better place, because it doesn't. But vacations are not evil. I'm not against vacations. So she somewhat vaguely argues that what will stay with you, what you will remember, are doing wonderful things like traveling, like going on vacation, like going to Italy, or I don't know, going to Thailand. Thailand is another example. And spending time with your friends, with people you love. I think she just talks about friends, not family, but whatever. So going on vacation to Italy and spending time with close friends. That these kinds of happy memories of this kind are what will really stay with you when you're 80 years old, or what matters to them. Now, I'm 37. I've got to tell you, I really disagree with that. I'm going to give you a couple of examples from my youth of what really stays with me and of what really shapes me as a person. And it's probably not what Claire Michelle would expect. It's not what many vegans expect. Maybe if you're watching this and you're over 50 years old, it's also not what you'd expect. And this channel, I just remind you guys, it contains a lot of very negative reflections on how awful university is. My experience at university in Canada is uniformly negative. I've got only bad things to say about university. So please do not think that this is a kind of uncritical endorsement of paying thousands of dollars in tuition as a pretext to read a stack of books. But look, I did research when I was a normal undergraduate student, normal university age, getting a normal crappy university degree. I just got an assignment to do an essay on the history of the civil war in Sudan. And the assignment was crappy. The professor was crappy. The whole class was crappy. It was a lousy course at a lousy university. And I got a lousy grade. I mean, I didn't do well on the test either. I didn't do well on paper, whatever you want to say. But, I sat down with a stack of books and I did some research on the history of the Civil War in the Sudan. And the guy who graded the paper didn't care and didn't know about the Civil War in Sudan. It was some TA. The whole context was completely uninspiring and frankly dehumanizing. And, there was no positive social interaction outside of it. I didn't have a nice conversation with the prof or the TA or anyone in the class about the Civil War. I was completely isolated, have this assignment, sit down with the books. But, in many ways, that research I did on the Civil War in Sudan, it still is with me today. It still is something that shapes who I am. It influenced the man I became. It influences how I think and feel about politics. Even though, now very intentionally before making this video, I did not open up Wikipedia. I did not open up Google and check anything. When I reflect on it, how much can I really remember from that reading? or that research. How many names of cities in Sudan could I even recall if I forced myself to? That fades. The names of the cities, obviously the dates and locations of the battles, and this I don't remember at all. How many of the names of the political leaders, the prime ministers or the rebel leaders, could I remember? Maybe one. Maybe all the other names have faded except one. Those details are not what stayed with me. But in a very real sense, the process of learning and a certain kind of political perspective that came out of that research really did stay with me. And, is that more emotional or is that more intellectual? I think probably a type of emotional change, maybe a type of appreciation that you gain from doing research of that kind, that stays with you, and it has an emotional effect. Just a few days ago here at my school, I was talking to some much younger men who I assume were around 25 years old. And the civil war in the Sudan came up. Amazingly, it's very rare in my whole life how often it's come up in conversation. And I remember I just said to them, yeah. I stated my opinion in one sense. I said, no, if you're interested, you can look into it. And one guy who was British, the British are always more easily offended than Americans in this stuff. He actually found that offensive, that I would just use the phrase, if you want to know more, you can look into it. He said, how dare you say to me, you can look into it. So, well, in my whole life, I read maybe 6 books about that civil war, but obviously the vast majority of people we're talking to have not even read a Wikipedia article on that. Now, I'm mentioning this. Sudan is so cut off from all my other interests in life. In other videos in the past, I mentioned the research I did on Haiti, the political history of Haiti. That also really influenced me, really shaped me in a lot of ways. Even though Haiti and Sudan have nothing to do with my interests in life. If you guys have watched this channel, on the one hand, you hear me talk about veganism, but also, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, China, etc. And at the time I did the research, I could not have known what it would mean to me or how much it would mean to me, especially given how crappy the whole context of the university course was, that there's nothing inspirational, nothing emotionally rewarding or warm or entertaining about it, unlike maybe going to a beach in Italy with your friends and taking pictures of yourself in a bikini and putting them on the internet. I think for many young people, you can't know that at the time. And even now, so now I'm 37, just a couple of months ago, I did a bunch of research on, and I wrote a long essay on, a political massacre, a political disaster where thousands of people died in the year 1920. And this massacre involved Russia, it involved Japan, it involved China, out in East Asia, where those countries overlap. So it's in Russian territory, but in East Asia. Fascinating. But also, again, that political history has an emotional impact on me. I think I broke down weeping twice in doing the research. Not open weeping, but I had tears come to my eyes. Because, I was reading detailed accounts of, mass murder, and including perspectives of survivors, people who were victims who survived, people who committed the crimes who survived and later reflected on it. What I personally find tragic or moving about it, different things I could say. Even now, even in my late 30s, there's a sense in which I can say to you, I don't know how that impacts me, how that changes me. But I can tell you one thing. I've been all around the world. I've been to beautiful places. I've seen beautiful things. Yes, I have spent time with friends. I'm not especially into beaches, but I've been to a couple beaches in my life. I've been to beautiful mountains. I've been to beautiful rivers. I've seen things that are both beautiful and horrific. I've seen bomb craters, and I've seen men living their whole lives with craters in their skin, craters in their faces from bullet wounds from war. I've got to tell you, just as Claire Michelle has come on and said, it's not your bikini, it's not your body that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. I have to tell you also, it's not tourism. It's not seeing beautiful things that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life and that you're going to look back on and think is meaningful when you're 80 years old. And the university system, as I know it, which is primarily in Canada, the university system is deeply flawed. But that does not mean that research itself is meaningless. That does not mean that learning itself is meaningless. And if you had the self-discipline to challenge yourself to sit down and do research on something as random as the Sudan or Haiti or Cambodia or anything, then you wouldn't need a university. But as terrible as my experience with the university is, with organized education of every kind is, I remain deeply grateful for the fact that I had that experience, that I had the opportunity and the conditions to sit down and learn about those political episodes. And when I'm 80 years old, if I live to be 80 years old, I will still look back and I will know that that really has changed me, that has shaped me, that has profoundly... That's changed the world as I know it, and it's changed the way I live in this world.